Imagine a world engulfed in flames, cities reduced to rubble, millions vaporized in an instant. This is not science fiction. This is the terrifying reality we face, the potential for World War III. Global tensions are running high. We must understand the forces pushing us towards the abyss. The 21st century began with a promise of peace and prosperity. Globalization seemed unstoppable. Yet beneath the surface, a darkness stirred. Economic inequality soared. Nationalism surged. Into this vacuum stepped a new generation of strongmen. They delivered division and fear. They view diplomacy as weakness. Their rhetoric is laced with threats. Their actions are often reckless and provocative. These leaders are playing with fire. They seem blind to the lessons of history. History teaches us that small sparks can ignite global conflagrations. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 plunged the world into darkness. A seemingly minor dispute in a distant corner of Europe escalated into a global conflict. Millions perished, empires crumbled. We must be vigilant against the forces that could unleash another catastrophe. Today, the world is riddled with potential flashpoints. The South China Sea simmers with tension. China, assertive and expansionist, lays claim to vast swaths of ocean. The United States, committed to maintaining its global dominance, pushes back. Miscalculation or accident could ignite a regional conflict. North Korea, armed with nuclear weapons, remains a volatile threat. Any provocation could have devastating consequences. Cyber warfare adds another layer of complexity to the global landscape. Nation-states and non-state actors engage in digital espionage, sabotage, and disinformation campaigns. A cyber attack on critical infrastructure could cripple a nation's economy or even trigger a military response. The world has been here before. Twice in the 20th century, global conflicts erupted from a tangled web of alliances, miscalculations, and nationalist fervor. World War I drew the great powers into a bloody stalemate. World War II, even more destructive, engulfed the globe in a titanic struggle. These conflicts left scars that linger to this day. They remind us of the fragility of peace and the devastating consequences of unchecked aggression. The Cold War brought the world to the brink of nuclear annihilation. The Cuban Missile Crisis demonstrated the terrifying potential for miscalculation. These historical examples offer valuable lessons. They teach us that even the most seemingly intractable conflicts can be resolved through diplomacy and dialogue. They warn us of the dangers of unchecked nationalism and militarism. In the event of World War III, predicting the course of the conflict is a fool's errand. The fog of war is thick. New technologies would transform the battlefield in unpredictable ways. Cyber attacks could cripple critical infrastructure. Nuclear weapons cast a long shadow over any future conflict. The use of even a single nuclear weapon would have catastrophic consequences. The globalized nature of the world economy means that the impact of a major conflict would be felt far beyond the battlefield. Supply chains would be disrupted. Financial markets would crash. The global economy would plunge into recession or even depression. Millions, perhaps billions, would be displaced from their homes. Refugees would overwhelm borders, straining resources and exacerbating social tensions. The very foundations of civilization would be tested. Unlike previous conflicts, World War III wouldn't be confined to battlefields. It would permeate every aspect of life. Propaganda and disinformation would flood the internet, fueling hatred and division. Governments would impose strict censorship, controlling the flow of information and suppressing dissent. Surveillance would become ubiquitous, eroding privacy and civil liberties. Economies would be geared towards war production. The comforts and freedoms we take for granted would vanish overnight. Trust would evaporate. Neighbor would turn against neighbor. The psychological toll of living under constant threat would be immense. Social cohesion would crumble. The world, once interconnected and interdependent, would fracture into isolated, heavily armed camps. The pursuit of peace would require a fundamental shift in our thinking. It would necessitate a recognition of our shared humanity and our common destiny. The interconnectedness of our world, once a source of hope and progress, would become our undoing. Global trade would grind to a halt. Food shortages would quickly follow, leading to widespread famine. The global economy would collapse. Cyber attacks would cripple infrastructure, disrupt financial markets, and sow chaos and confusion. Propaganda and disinformation would spread like wildfire. Climate change would be exacerbated by the conflict. The detonation of nuclear weapons would trigger a nuclear winter. The most terrifying aspect of World War III is the potential for nuclear escalation. Even a limited nuclear exchange would have catastrophic global consequences. Millions would perish instantly, vaporized in the searing heat of nuclear fireballs. Countless more would succumb to radiation sickness. The detonation of multiple nuclear weapons would loft millions of tons of soot and debris into the upper atmosphere. This dense cloud would block sunlight and plunge the planet into a prolonged period of darkness and cold. Crops would wither and die, leading to widespread famine. Freshwater sources would be contaminated by radioactive fallout. Ecosystems would collapse, unable to adapt to the rapid environmental changes. Human civilization as we know it would cease to exist. In the aftermath of such a catastrophe, the very concept of a nation-state might cease to have meaning. The institutions that once governed our lives would lie in ruins. The survivors would be thrust into a brutal struggle for survival. The lucky ones would find refuge in isolated communities. They would rebuild their lives from scratch, clinging to the remnants of their shared humanity. The lessons learned from the ashes of World War III would be harsh but invaluable. They would teach us the true cost of conflict and the importance of safeguarding our planet. We stand at a crossroads in human history. The path we choose will determine the fate of our species. We can continue down the road of confrontation and conflict, a path that leads inevitably to destruction. Or we can choose a different path, a path of dialogue, cooperation, and mutual understanding. The challenges we face are complex and multifaceted. There are no easy answers, no quick fixes, but one thing is clear. The solutions lie not in military might, but in the power of human ingenuity and compassion. We must find a way to transcend our differences. We must embrace the principles of tolerance, empathy, and understanding. The future of our species, the future of our planet, depends on it. The choice before us is stark, but clear. We can cling to the outdated notions of nationalism, competition, and dominance. Or we can embrace a new vision of the future, one based on cooperation and shared responsibility for our planet. This new vision requires a fundamental shift in our thinking. It demands that we move beyond the zero-sum games of the past. Instead, we must embrace a win-win paradigm. The same forces that bind us together also amplify the risks of conflict and collapse. The choice is ours. We can choose to be architects of our future, building a world where peace, prosperity, and sustainability are the shared reality of all humankind.